But we do get started in Lansing. You know, they were so close and yet so far away. If we all thought a roads deal was going to get done this fall, like all of our elected officials said it was, well, fooled again. According to the governor and the leadership late this week, they're at an impasse. The sticking point, an across-the-board income tax cut. So let's take a look at why this is a problem and bring in our MiWeek contributors, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News. Guys, you know what? I have to say I was not shocked that there's not a roads deal right now. And I think, though, that most of the state is pretty angry that, that there's not a deal. And I'm going to start with you, Nolan. What is going on?
You know, I talked to some of the principals Tuesday morning early before they went into this bargaining session, and they were all optimistic. You know, we're getting close. We get a little closer every day. And they mentioned, you know, here are the sticking points, which included the desire of the Republican caucus to give an income tax hike if there's a surplus. And they got in an hour later. They walked out, and the governor said it's an impasse. And I talked to one of the governor's guys beforehand. He said, well, he's getting very frustrated. He thinks it's past time to get a deal done, and he's tired of beating his head against the same issue. I suspect he was clearing the plate for his education plan, which he's going to drop next week, and he didn't want both out there.
Okay, now wait a minute. Before we even get to the education plan, we've been told all along that nothing is going to happen in the legislature unless this roads deal gets done. That it's going to be roads first and nothing else. And I'm really baffled as to why.
Well, so we're left with nothing else then, because I mean they're not going to get a roads deal at this point.
Can that really be an answer though at this point for everyone across the state of Michigan who, if they're feeling frustrated in Lansing, I got to tell you, frustrated may not even be the word that people in Michigan are feeling.
No, I think you're right. It's not. It's way beyond frustration, and it's also going to spill over now into the electoral season next year. You'll see this ballot initiative, I think, from the unions to raise corporate income taxes to pay for roads, which will be very divisive. I mean, I think we need to raise taxes to fix the roads. I think that particular proposal will split the state pretty evenly and bitterly over a question that we should be able to solve much easier. I mean, there have been lots of different ways that have come up to pay for this, spreading the burden of it around, you know, making sure that everybody pays something. It's just, I mean, it's baffling why it can't get done. But, you know, I would also say that this governor is getting frustrated with the legislature, not just on this issue. There have been some other things that he's expressed privately and some publicly about the sort of recalcitrance of this legislature, that legislature dominated by his own party. He can't convince them to do things that are on his agenda and make really good sense. And so I think there's a more sort of profound split that is going on here.
Is that true, Nolan, that he cannot convince his own party to do things? And where do you think the communication breakdown is, if that is indeed true?
Can't convince either party to do anything on roads, but I think you're seeing in a lot of ways the effects of term limits. Kevin Cotter, the House Speaker, this is his first time doing this in terms of negotiating a deal. They have had a signed agreement. The four quadrant leaders, the four legislative leaders, and the governor have had a signed deal for over a month, an agreement in principle on how to make the split. They can't get the caucuses to go along. They're fighting now over this idea of if there's a surplus, we're going to refund it. In terms of an income tax rebate, the governor's saying, wait a minute, we've got the school plan, we've got the Medicaid hit that's going to be $200, $400, $600 million. Nobody seems to know. He's very worried about depleting the general fund, but it seems like such a silly thing to get hung up on. And I was in Lansing yesterday all day, and now people are starting to talk about, well, this will have to wait till lame duck next year, and the DPS stuff will have to wait. And that's incredible to think about.
Wow, and I think you have a lot of disappointment from people who watch this and say, wow, when Gamrat and Courser were under fire, we had all-night sessions. We had people staying up late, negotiating, really working very hard to deal on that situation.
That was because nobody could figure out how to make it work. I mean, you had a speaker who didn't understand that you don't bring something to the floor until you have enough votes to get it done. That's why the Courser-Gamrat thing went all night that night. I mean, and again, it gets to this inexperience. I mean, there's nobody there who can say, well, you know, this is how this works. I've seen it before. I can manage it and get it through.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. When do you press the panic button and saying, we're never going to get a roads deal done? I mean, where's the drop dead?
It's going to end up on the ballot.
Since it was on the ballot and the voters turned it down, and then they said, we're going to, hang on, I'm talking. I'm still talking. And then the voters turned it down, and then you had leadership say, we're going to get something done within a month. Then you went to summer. Then they said, no, we're going to break for the summer. We're getting it done first thing when we come back in the beginning of the fall. So when do we finally say, okay, this is not going to happen?
Well, I don't know if you can ever say that because the need's too urgent. I think, you know, the governor may have been last week signaling to lawmakers that this is it. This is as far as I'm going. So, you know, you guys come along the rest of the way. This may have been a leverage move. You may see them come back next week and get a deal done. They've got to keep working on it. They can't walk away from the table.
You know, they throw out the amount, and I think everyone's still agreeing on the $1.2 billion. And it makes me think, is that still
probably low now?
I was going to say, is that still the correct amount?
It's all you're going to get.
Well, you know, the longer you wait, the more expensive it is. It's like anything else. If you wait to replace your roof till there's a 6-foot hole in it, it costs you more than if there's just a little leak. So, you know, I mean, we've been talking about this for 4 years now, the need to have more money to keep the roads in better shape and invest in better roads down the road. It's just we can't get there, and I do think that the governor's frustration is going to become sort of part of the narrative in Lansing, that his frustration with the legislature over a number of things. And, you know, if he thinks that moving this off the plate to put schools on it is somehow going to make it easier, that's a tougher issue to sell in the legislature. So, you know, it's not going to get better over that. I do think, though, this is going to end up on the ballot next year.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think the legislature...
Why would they do it next year, though?
The legislature won't put it on the ballot. They're done with that. They've tried that and failed.
But you'll have an initiative,
well, if you can get an initiative up in that amount of time, if it's the income tax initiative, that's going to be a $30 million fight. I mean, that is going to be ridiculous. But if this thing isn't settled before we move into 2016 and that election campaign year, nothing's going to get done hard next year.
All right. Well, so talk a little bit about next week and what the governor's strategy would be, Nolan, in terms of coming to the legislature and now bringing out the Detroit Schools Plan, which we have talked so much about, and in terms of we had been waiting on that because we were waiting for roads to get done. How difficult now is this position for the governor?
Well, it's extraordinarily difficult because he needs $350 million from him, and that's probably not enough. I think some of the structural reforms in terms of reshaping how the Detroit public schools are governed and these sort of layers of oversight, you know, that shouldn't be that hard to get through. But when it comes down to the fact that we've got to have an appropriation for these schools, I don't see how he gets it.
What do you think?
I think selling this again as a fix for Detroit is going to be the problem, and I think you know, for both the governor and the mayor, who now has his own plan that he wants in DPS, the strategy is going to have to be, what is this? Why not put it in the context of the larger state problem? Lots of districts have the same issue that DPS is facing, and that's going to be the source of resentment if you say we're only going to do this in Detroit. I think you got to start talking about these long-term legacy obligations everywhere and fixing that in a way that helps everyone who has the problem. And it's not just poor districts like Detroit. Some wealthy districts are in this same bind.
But again, you're now talking about a huge amount of money when we can't get, you know, the money we need for roads, and you've got these other issues coming up. I mean, this Medicaid problem is going to be massive, and they have no clue yet where that money is going to come from, and so
you got to raise it.
You know, you can raise only so much from your citizens and from your businesses. I mean, we have dug ourselves in such a huge hole on so many different issues that it is going to be very painful to get out.
Back to the fact that they can't get the roads deal done. Nolan, let me ask you about in terms of trust and how people see Michigan's legislature now, what kind of trust they have in them to do their jobs, and does it lend more to your argument, or I guess your push for a part-time legislature?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, we may not get that on the ballot in 16 because of the challenges of getting it done that quickly. But, you know, certainly by the 18 election, we should have a ballot proposal on that says term limits are gone. This is a part-time legislature. We're going to focus their attention, make them more effective. I mean, they can come back here and say, we're going to dither on this all fall because there's no deadline. And, you know, to have people in Lansing talking about lame duck session in 216, that's where we're going to get a deal here.
That makes me ill.
By that time, what will our roads look
They
like?
won't get to a lame duck session in 2016. I really do believe that if they don't get this done this year in the regular session, you will see some sort of ballot initiative next year, maybe a couple of them.
Who's going to drive it?
Well, I mean, I think the unions are talking about the corporate tax.
Well,
they'll put their money into that.
That's probably going to be on the ballot.
Yeah. Well, and that could inspire some other people to put things on the ballot. You could have dueling proposals to try to come up with this money.
And this is what happens when you have an ineffective legislature.
Well, it is.
You know, you've got people trying to solve the problems through ballot initiatives.
All right, let's try to have a little bit of faith that a cooling off period might help these folks
They've had
out
a
up
cooling
there.
off period
Yeah,
all
I know.
summer.
I know.
I mean,
I know.
This is about, I mean, fundamental disconnects between the governor and the legislature. I don't know what
that you don't think can be fixed.
The separating issue is just like this. It is not a
But it's not about the
issue.
It is about ideology.
Right.
It is about belief, and those are things that you can't really negotiate. So
You know, they want to be able to go to
right.
the voters and say, well, we raise your taxes here, we cut
Right.
them here. And what you ought to be saying to voters is, look at our roads.
raise your taxes and fix your
You know,
roads.
Yeah, well, I think everyone-
you know, I busted a tire, spent $400 or $500 on a tire. I mean, I'm sure that would have been more expensive than a gas station.
No one disagrees that it needs to get done.